For most of my life, I struggled with something so basic, so apparently easy, yet so hard to get it actually right. Something that each and every one of us more or less does. And that thing was sleep. And I think I'm not the only one. I went too late to bed, I couldn't wake up, I'm tired during the day, I didn't want to sleep, I couldn't fall asleep, or I woke up during the night.
And I decided that this just couldn't go on any longer. I had to find a way to get my sleep schedule, my sleep quality and my energy levels during the day right, and there had to be something I could do.
So I went out, did my research and tried to find any tips, tricks and changes I could make to improve these.
So sit back, grab a cup of coffee. No, wait. We better talk about coffee in a minute or so. Anyways, here's what makes a perfect sleep routine according to science.
So first and foremost, why does this really matter? Isn't sleeping something for lazy people? Well, in modern hustle culture, not sleeping much has become the status symbol for any hardworking, successful business person or high achiever.
And people started to brag about how much, or rather how little they were sleeping.
Barack Obama, 6 hours a night. Elon Musk, 6 hours a night. Tom Ford, 3 hours a night? If I look at these numbers, I'm a bit shocked, because when I try to sleep that little, I'm tired during the whole day.
And if you feel the same, then studies suggest that we might not be alone with this.
In a survey conducted in the United States, 50 million people, thus 15% of the population, reported that they had chronic sleep problems. And a whopping additional 100 million people, thus 30% of the population, reported that they did not sleep enough on a consistent basis.
And what is so interesting about all of this is that for a long time people assumed like, yeah, maybe I sleep too little, but hey, what's the big deal? I just drink some more coffee.
And although normally I think that drinking more coffee is generally a good idea because, well, it's tasty, science simply doesn't recommend this.
Study after study shows that not sleeping enough on a consistent basis will directly contribute to a huge number of devastating health issues.
The shorter you sleep, the shorter your life. These aren't my words, but those of PhD Matthew Walker from USC Berkeley, who's a neuroscientist and a sleep scientist. And here's what he has to say about this.
The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Short sleep predicts all-cause mortality.
In his book, Why We Sleep, he says, quote, "Every major system, tissue, organ of your body suffers when sleep becomes short. Lack of sleep is the leading cause of disease and death in developed nations. Years of research and study after study showed that people who slept too little had a higher risk of becoming obese and developing diabetes type 2, as their hunger hormone ghrelin and their satiety hormone leptin get out of control. They have an increased calorie consumption and a worse ability to actually use those calories. And additionally to that, sleep-deprived participants tended to eat more junk food in general.
And also, they had a higher risk of developing cardiovascular problems.
As sleeping too little increases your heart rate, this makes your heart pump more blood through your body, which leads to hypertension and the deterioration of your arteries, which makes sleeping too little clearly cause strokes due to these effects. And last but definitely not least,
sleep deprivation does significantly weaken your immune system.
It is no wonder that the only thing you want to do when you have a fever is to lay in bed. Sleeping, figuratively speaking, creates a shield that blocks out and fights infections and viruses. And even a single missed night of sleep will tear this shield against infections down. In one study, they injected a flu virus to 150 healthy men and women, and from those who slept more than 7 hours a night, only 17% actually got infected. Those who slept 5 to 6 hours a night had an infection rate of 50%.
But it's not only about catching a flu or a cold, but also your body's ability to detect self-destructing cells in your body. Cancer that is reduced immensely. As in one study, mice that slept too little had a 200% increased cancer growth and cancer size compared to those who slept enough.
Matthew Walker says that not getting sufficient sleep when fighting a battle against cancer is like pouring gasoline on an already aggressive fire.
Also, not to forget, not sleeping enough increases your risk for Alzheimer's, for impotence, for mental health related problems like depression, anxiety.
Okay, now that we know that it matters, what actually makes good sleep? Well, it turns out that this question is a bit trickier to answer than I would have thought.
It is hard to believe, but humanity, up to very recently, hasn't really understood why we sleep, what we do when sleeping, and whether it actually matters. For most of humanity, it has been a mystery. In ancient times, people had explanations for why we sleep that just seem absurd today. The Greek physician Hippocrates and the philosophers Plato and Aristotle thought the reason you sleep is so that toxic gases that stem from your food can be broken down and leave your body, and that your blood that overheats during the day can cool down at night. And because unlike other physiological functions in your body, sleep cannot really be attributed to a specific organ, so there was no way of knowing what it actually did. So there was no way of actually studying it back then.
But all of this drastically changed in the 20th century because more has been learned about sleep in the past 100 years than in the past 6,000 years.
This explosion in sleep research and understanding all started in 1924. When a method called the EEG was developed by German psychiatrist Hans Berger that for the first time would allow humans to observe the sleeping brain in detail. Hans Berger was the first to record that it seemed like the brain had different wave patterns during sleep and during the day.
And sleep research would from then on change drastically with this new tool at hand that for the first time would allow us humans in our whole existence to have a look at what actually happens in our brains when we sleep.
A year later, in 1925, the focus would shift towards Chicago, where Dr. Nathaniel Kleitman, who later would be called the father of American sleep research, started his research at the University of Chicago. And he opened the first sleep laboratory in the world. He was obsessed and fascinated to find out why we sleep and what actually happens during sleep. For example, when he wanted to verify something about our body's own inner clock by spending 32 days living in dark, deep cave in Kentucky, or other interesting self-tests in an underwater submarine from World War II, other times in the Arctic cycle, or staying awake up to 180 hours.
And all of that to better understand sleep.
Years of research by him and his colleagues and successors discovered that we as humans seem to have something like a quite precise inner clock that really much dictates our sleep and wake cycle. And also, most importantly, they discovered that when we sleep, there were phases when our brain seemed to be highly active and almost awake at night, at other times quietly working and processing information, and also that these phases seemed to repeat themselves.
And all of this led to our current understanding of how our sleep works.
And what we now know is that our sleep is divided into two major parts, NREM and REM sleep. When you fall asleep, you enter a stage of NREM sleep for a couple of minutes when your brain and body wind down and relax. Then you go a little deeper and enter stage 2 of NREM sleep. Your heart rate goes up, your core temperature sinks, you cannot be woken up so easily. Finally, you arrive at the crucial stage 3 of NREM sleep, which is also called deep sleep. Deep because it's very hard to wake you up in this state, and if done so, you will feel sleep nauseous and disorientated. But you shouldn't do so, because you need that high-quality deep sleep in order to be rested in the morning. In deep sleep, you will be completely relaxed, and tons of biological processes, such as tissue repair, hormone regulation, immune system optimization, and much more happen in this stage 3 phase of NREM sleep. What apparently weirdly happens after stage 3 is that your body isn't just relaxed anymore. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing intensifies, and yet your body becomes completely limp. If one would lift your arm when being in this stage, one could think that you are dead, because there's no tone or any muscle activation whatsoever in your body in this phase, except for your eyes, which are moving heavily around. Hence the name, rapid eye movement, and previously, non-rapid eye movement sleep. In the REM stage of your sleep, almost all of your dreams, and explicitly the most vivid and realistic dreams, happen. Your brain simulates sometimes absurd scenarios, a mixture of past memories, bizarre stories, and completely made-up characters, which, to top it off, feels super realistic once you dream it. This form of sleep, REM sleep, is a sleep stage that is by far most common in highly developed species, such as, at its peak, us humans, because it's linked to your memory, learning, understanding, and emotional regulation. Skip REM sleep and you risk many brain and cognitive related health risks. And we cycle through these stages every 90 minutes or so. You're awake, you fall asleep, you go deeper, you dream, and then again light sleep. And all of this several times each night, on and on. Okay, so we covered the theory. We know what sleep is, how it works, and why it's important. But how do I finally sleep better? How do I have more energy during the day and a more restful night? Well, let's find out.
When it comes to sleep, there are three factors we have to consider. First, our biological need, things that are just not negotiable. Number two, things that destroy our sleep, things that you just should avoid. And number three, your very much own choices and things you can do to improve your sleep.
So let's quickly start off with our biological need. And it's actually not that complicated. All it boils down to is that we get enough sleep and to go through all these different sleep stages and cycles that we just mentioned.
And then to actually go through them. That means drinking a six-pack of beer before falling asleep will most likely make you sleepier in the first place, but will absolutely destroy your quality of sleep and won't let you tap into those different sleep stages, but more on that later.
So, how much sleep do we actually need? Sleep researcher Matthew Walker says that the sweet spot is around 7 to 9 hours. Go below that mark and you will risk all the health risks mentioned earlier, such as cardiovascular problems, immune system deficiency, and so on. You can probably think of someone who would say, "Well, I'm only sleeping 6 hours each night and I'm perfectly fine. You can sleep when you're dead."
Well, yes and no. Although it has been proven that a very small percentage of people really can get by with 5 hours, with 6 hours of sleep a night, most people don't fall into this category.
A very good example is sleep need and aging, for example. The older we get, the shorter we typically sleep, and many elderly individuals say that they do fine with just 5 hours of sleep a night. Matthew Walker says that although these individuals feel alright and are not overly tired during the day, they're suffering more and more from the health risks associated with sleep deprivation without actually linking these to their lack of sleep, because they do not notice that they have a lack of sleep. What he says is that not being tired does not mean sleeping enough. As you age, people actually lose the ability to sleep long enough and deep enough, which makes them think they're doing okay, but are actually really not, which in itself will speed up aging even more.
So make sure that you get your 8 hours of sleep.
But if you want to have even more benefits, don't aim for 8 hours of sleep a night, but aim for something like 8.5 to 9 hours of a sleep opportunity window a night. That means the time you actually spend in bed.
What many people forget is that it usually takes some 50 minutes to fall asleep, and without really noticing it, we wake up many times during the night for some minutes, not even including going to the bathroom, which is why laying in bed for 8 hours will more likely be something like 7 or 7.5 hours of sleep. And by aiming for a sleep opportunity window of 8.5 or 9 hours, you make sure that you actually sleep those real 8 hours. So all you have to do is to do that every single night. Every all-nighter, short night or so, is damage to your body that cannot be healed by sleeping more on the weekends. And yeah, this is your foundation. This is what your body needs to function properly and excel.
In a perfect world, I could end the video right here.
But in reality, there are many things standing in our way. Many things that are depriving us from sleep, that are stealing those valuable hours of slumber each and every night. Some candidates are rather obvious and some are surprising, I think.
Which is why we have to protect our sleep at all costs from these behaviors that are ruining our sleep.
If you look at it this way, our modern society loves to do everything late. We work late hours, we eat late dinner. If we manage to do so, we work out late in the day, because this is when I have time.
And in a sense, our body simply isn't made to be used this way.
We evolved as a species to mostly wake up around dawn, work and eat and live when there was the sun outside, and then to go to sleep when it got dark, because it was cold, it was unsafe outside, and again it was really dark, outdoors and indoors. So there simply wasn't much to do back then. And all of this changed heavily with the invention of the light bulb. 200 years ago, artificial lights made it possible for humanity to now use this giant slot of the day, which was untouched for all of human existence. Suddenly, you could do everything you did during the day, during the night. Industrialization made good use of it, and suddenly things like late and night shifts, which simply weren't feasible up to then, started to become a normal part of the day. Suddenly, people started to come home later and later in the day, cramming their regular needs, if even possible to do so because they worked so much back then, late in the day. Lunch, what used to be the main meal in the day, was now mostly replaced with dinner. Evenings were the only time the working class saw their families, and so for everything they did, The night was the new day. And exactly this trend has been continued until right now today. Based on what I'm going to tell you in a second, I started to think for myself about the do everything earlier principle. Start thinking like people before electricity when it comes to structuring your day and especially your evening. Start shifting your activities, if possible, from the evening to the day and the morning. And it becomes way easier to avoid behaviors that could otherwise harm your sleep.
But let's kick things off with 7 things that you should avoid that harm your sleep.
First category, it looks energizing but may drain your batteries.
So let's start off with the elephant in the room. Number 1, if you drink coffee and are like me,
then there's a good chance that, like me, you can handle a cup of coffee well late into the night. I can proudly say that I can gulp down a triple espresso just before hitting the sack and sleep like a baby.
But is this something I should actually do?
Science clearly says no. Again, as earlier said, your personal perception about whether you can fall asleep easily or sleep just fine does often not match your sleep data in reality if you were to measure it. And this is absolutely the case when it comes to caffeine. No matter if coffee, mate, tea, cola or energy drinks, experts agree that you should stop your caffeine consumption not around 7 or 8 p.m., but somewhere between 11 and 3 p.m.
And the reason for that is that the caffeine in these drinks will of course make you fall asleep later, will make you sleep less in general, and will make your sleep less satisfying.
And crucially, it may reduce the amount of deep sleep, thus slow wave sleep, you need, which is highly responsible for whether you feel refreshed the next day or not. But why do I have to stop drinking it so early? Caffeine has a so-called half-life time of 5 to 7 hours. This means that after 5 to 7 hours, only 50% of the caffeine has actually been digested already. 5 to 7 hours after that, still 25% of the caffeine is left. 5 to 7 hours later, it's 12% and so on. So drinking a cup of coffee in the late afternoon is the same as drinking half a cup of coffee just before sleep or drinking a quarter cup of coffee in the middle of the night.
And talking about not being able to fall asleep, somehow the same applies to number 2, taking naps.
I love a good nap in the day. Every time I visited Mediterranean countries, I fell in love with the idea of siestas. If you feel tired in the middle of the day, doing a light power nap from like 10 to 25 minutes has been shown to have many great effects on you. Better than a cup of coffee. But the devil comes in the detail. Doing your naps too late in the day, that means somewhere after 3 p.m., will drastically reduce your body's desire to actually fall asleep the night. When it's bedtime, you are awake. You can't fall asleep, so you will be tired the next day. This is a downward spiral, because the more you are tired, the more you want to nap the next day. And if you do it too late again, you can't fall asleep this night as well, and it goes on and on.
Make good use of a short power nap, but don't do it after 3 p.m.
Right. So, what is your ideal routine when you come back home in the evening? Well, for me, it usually looks like this.
I still want to work out, I want to eat dinner, I want to be a bit productive, and I want to calm down and chill. So number 3, dinner. When I come home late, I either eat dinner as soon as I can, or if this is not possible, I make it a very light meal.
Eating late in the day is often the only time we have to eat a real warm meal. But science suggests that we should either eat early in the day or overthink what we eat before bed.
You see, big, heavy meals have a huge negative impact on your quality of sleep. If you eat something big before sleep, it will be digested while you sleep. And even though you might not notice it, your digestion takes up an enormous amount of your body's energy. Energy that is actually crucially needed in other parts of your body at night. Only when your digestion is completed, your body can fully focus on the different sleep stages, which effectively very much deprives you of going through enough sleep cycles and effectively tapping into deep sleep, REM sleep, and so on.
Also, if you consume too many liquids with your meal or on its own, or through the meal itself,
you're very much likely to have to go to the bathroom at night. Just one interruption more of your sleep that is easily avoidable.
So what you can do is to avoid very large and heavy meals before bed that are rich in both carbohydrates and fat. And ideally you should stop eating around 3 hours before bed to increase your quality of sleep.
And also cut down on liquids before bed as well. Pretty much the same goes for number 4, working out. I think I don't have to tell you the many ways working out is good for you. But as with many things, there is a point when it might do more harm than good.
We are all different. Some of us prefer to work out in the morning, some of us during the day, and some of us late in the evening. And actually, this is all fine.
But if you fall into the later category, it is crucial for you that you are done around 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Don't work out just before bed, because you might be tired and groggy after your workout and think you will have great sleep. Your body really is in overdrive mode. Your core temperature increases, your heart rate goes up, all of which are preventing you from sleeping deeply. Most of the time when you go to sleep just after working out, your sleep will be shallow. You wake up a lot and don't tap into those important sleep stages that are crucial for your health.
So if it's too late in the day, either do a really light workout, or if your goal is to maximize your quality of sleep, skip the workout and do it in the next morning so that you avoid the negative health impacts.
Okay, so now we had dinner, we handled our workout situation, but what about some work that we have to catch up on?
This is technically no problem at all. If you want to do some shallow light work or have to work a bit later or do any kind of chores and tasks in the evening, this is per se fine if you don't sacrifice your sleep amount.
And it really depends on what kind of work or task you are doing. Remember the do everything earlier principle.
Is it as physically exhausting as a workout? Then you might be better off doing it the next day.
Aim for work that isn't physically demanding.
But it is also important whether what you are doing is cognitively demanding or rather stressing. If you do the dishes, no problem. Boring, but chill. If you catch up on writing an essay, not big of a problem, at least if the deadline isn't tomorrow.
Not only avoiding physical stress, but also very much mental stress is very important.
Answering your emails regarding your bankruptcy? Not a good idea. Your mind will be shattering all night long. Having an argument with your partner? Never a good idea, but especially at night.
You'll be raging, you'll be very emotional, and your mind is very alert.
That is why sleep experts actually recommend not to talk about critical or controversial topics with your partner before going to bed.
As this surely will hinder you from falling asleep.
Maybe because you have to sleep on the couch. Alright, now the last thing. What about relaxing and chilling a bit before bed? Number 6.
And it's actually quite straightforward. Do stuff that fits the evening and reduce things that makes you more alert.
And here's the thing. In most cases, this means don't turn on that TV in the evening. Don't scroll in bed before sleep. Although it feels very pleasant in the moment, scientists agree that electronic devices and consuming such media before bed makes you more alert and suppresses the production of melatonin, which in effect lowers your urge to sleep.
Action, horror and thriller movies, cliffhangers or the current world news will maybe not be that helpful for you to fall asleep.
And what sleep scientists recommend you to do instead is to create some form of a wind-down routine about 60 minutes before going to bed. Winding down means to actually allow yourself and your body to decompress and relax and slowly end the day. This can be reading something, doing your skincare routine, listening to music, whatever brings you down and relaxes you. This will help you immensely to fall asleep quicker. Bad ideas.
2 candidates are nicotine and alcohol, and it's no surprise that these ones aren't healthy.
Science says that both are in any amount a high risk factor for your health.
But especially before bed, you want to at least avoid consuming both nicotine and alcohol.
Will make you perhaps a bit sleepier and help fall asleep, but both are responsible for a disruption in your sleep cycles, shorter sleep, reduction in REM sleep, and also waking up more often.
And surprisingly, the same actually applies to sleeping pills. They maybe make you fall asleep and actually sleep the night, but the quality of sleep is disastrous.
Matthew Walker recommends that if you currently take any kind of sleeping pills, he highly advises you to contact your doctor and look for other potential methods. All of this up to now sounds very rather tense, to be honest. You have to do this, you should avoid this, that, etc. Otherwise you will suffer this malady or the other. This somehow makes the whole topic of sleep very uneasy and almost anxiety-inducing, at least to me. It's no wonder that the term sleep anxiety really is a thing, but all of this doesn't have to be this way.
You see, as absurd as it sounds, sleeping is like any other skill in the world. Sure, there's some rules you have to follow, there's some things that you have to avoid, but the outcome isn't determined in the first place. And there are many things that you can do to improve the quality of your sleep and have more energy during the day. So here's not what you should avoid, here's not what you have to do, but here's some things that you can do to improve the quality of your sleep. One quick thing I wanted to mention is that if you enjoyed the video so far and would like to see more, then I would really appreciate if you would consider subscribing, as this helps me and the channel out to grow and make more videos in the future. But anyways, here is now really what you can do to improve your sleep.
So to understand what each and every one of us can do to actually improve our sleep, let us go back to Nathaniel Kleitman and his first groundbreaking research on sleep. Yeah, exactly, the one who used himself as a guinea pig in his experiments. He didn't only contribute to the discovery of NREM and REM sleep and why it matters so much, but also to the discovery of a phenomenon called the circadian rhythm. He and his student went to the most isolated place, free of any day and night related clues that they could find.
So they set up their camp in the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky, wanted to find out, does the body have something like an inner rhythm? A fixed inner rhythm, or is it all just dependent on the rise and fall of the sun, societal norms, and so on? So they spent the next 32 days in this dark, giant cave, 80 meters below sea level, where it was constantly 12 degrees Celsius, there was no noise, no sunlight, and most importantly, no clocks, so that their bodies didn't have any chance of knowing what time it was.
And what they found out was not what they expected.
Even with no external clues whatsoever, their bodies and all the bodily indicators they measured on themselves followed a same pattern. A somewhat inner rhythm, a clock that happened to be repeating itself over and over, which dictates or contributes to almost all bodily functions. When we wake up, when we are hungry, when we are energized, tired, and eventually when we want to go to sleep.
Surprisingly, in this study, it was not a 24-hour rhythm, as one would maybe expect, but it was a 28-hour rhythm. And this was really early research back then.
But further research really confirmed that our own body clock, our circadian rhythm, is not a 24-hour cycle, but 24.5 hours.
So you might wonder that if your own body's inner clock is longer than a normal day, doesn't it increasingly get out of hand?
Day 1 it's just a 30-minute difference, day 5 is already 150 minutes, day 14, and yes, this is what would happen.
And without help, the body would have a completely separated rhythm that wouldn't match the day whatsoever.
And this is what can happen by this. You're tired when you should be awake, and you're 100% awake when it's time to sleep.
And it's actually pretty much the same as rewinding a mechanical clock.
That without help would also be increasingly off. In order to prevent this, your body has multiple ways of knowing what time it actually is. These so-called Zeitgebers, from German, to give the time, tell the body what time it actually is, so that your waking up and going to sleep pattern matches the day and night cycle.
And the most potent Zeitgeber, thus signal to our body what time it actually is what we humans were used to and depended on for almost our whole existence.
For our whole existence, we started our day with the rise of the sun and ended it with it going down. Sun exposure is the most potent Zeitgeber when it comes to rewinding our circadian rhythm, our own body clock.
Now, we said about reducing light exposure before you go to bed, but light exposure in the morning is very good at setting the biological clock to the light-dark cycle, so seek out morning light.
This is Russell Foster. He's a professor of circadian neuroscience and the author of the book Lifespan, where he explains how the circadian rhythm affects every part of our biological existence, and moreover the link between sun exposure as a Zeitgeber and sleep quality. Quote, simply, the most effective way to set your body clock is to experience natural light 30 to 60 minutes after sunrise and before sunset. If you want to shift your circadian rhythm forward, thus being sleepier earlier in the evening instead of only late at night, it is recommended to get out in the sun as quickly as possible after waking up for about 30 minutes. This way, your circadian rhythm will be rewinded again, allowing you to fall asleep earlier and easier in the evening. Because when dusk arrives, when the evening starts, your inner clock will precisely know which time it is. For similar reasons, it is generally recommended to have about 2 hours of sunlight exposure every day. Preferably, as Russell Foster said, in both especially morning and also in the evening. You shouldn't look into the sun, of course, but you should be outside, because even on a cloudy day, it is immensely brighter outside than in your room, which will allow your circadian rhythm to adapt. Additionally, if you wake up when the sun isn't out yet, you can use a so-called daylight lamp, which is significantly brighter than a usual lamp, and you can just put it on your table while you breakfast or brush your teeth for some 30 minutes in the morning, and it will do about the same job. Just look for a lamp with a so-called lux level of at least 10,000, so that it is bright enough to activate those wanted processes. Talking about mornings and evenings again, sleep scientist Matthew Walker recommends in his book as well to go to bed and wake up at fixed times every single day. Because we are creatures of habit, and sticking to the same time each and every day will make it much easier for ourselves to stick to this routine and wake up and feel sleepy automatically each day. So it's definitely a helpful thing to do.
Alright, we woke up at plus minus the same time as every day. We had our sun exposure in the morning, we had our sun exposure during the day, and we'll soon go to bed at plus minus the same time as every day. But all throughout this video, we haven't even talked a single time about where we should actually apply all this knowledge that we've gathered so far.
It is your bed, or rather your bedroom, or rather where and how you sleep.
Sleep isn't just something that you do, it's a third of your life. And the way how you spend the night in bed has a huge impact on your quality of sleep.
If your bedding simply isn't something you look forward to, then it is the first thing you can change. And the best thing is, a good bed or a sleeping place doesn't have to be expensive in order to work. Many cultures in the world deliberately sleep on the floor because they do prefer it. So don't think you need a $1,000 mattress and bed frame for it.
It should be comfortable, how you like it, and clean, so don't forget to regularly change your sheets. And generally it should be a place you look forward to spend your night in.
Additionally, think of your bed as a place that is more or less only for sleep. The more things you do inside your bed that doesn't have anything to do with sleeping, the more trouble your brain has to actually associate your bed with sleep. Because in an ideal world, laying down under your sheets has only one meaning: sleep.
The more you practice this form of so-called sleep hygiene, the easier and quicker it gets for you to actually fall asleep when you go to bed.
But the more other things you do in bed, like watching TV, scrolling, eating, gaming, the more confused your body gets when you actually just want to sleep. Because there isn't simply that direct link of bed equals sleeping anymore. Because now it's bed equals sofa, workplace, kitchen, movie theater, whatsoever. Which is why sleep experts actually recommend to ban your TV from your bedroom.
And the same actually applies to the bedroom itself. Often, especially when you're young, your room is something like a multi-purpose room.
Every other additional item in your room does distract from what this room is actually for. In an ideal world, it is a room with a bed. Its sole purpose is to offer you a space to sleep.
But I know that this is mostly not that simple, because space is often tight. So I think you should prioritize the sleep hygiene in your bed first. And when you mastered and practice this, you can, if you have the abilities to, practice sleep hygiene in your whole room, if you can do so.
Light plays a huge role as well in whether you can fall asleep or not. Therefore, try to make your room as dark as possible. If you don't have jalousies or blinds in your room, buy some from Amazon. Or, alternatively, pitch black curtains, which will eliminate all the light that's coming in from the window. Additionally, hunt and eliminate every single remaining little light or lamp that is still blinking in your room at night. This is so important because, as we learned, light is a so-called Zeitgeber, thus a signal to your circadian rhythm that it is in fact still day. So make it dark. Noises are a bit ambivalent. You want to create a sleeping space where you can easily fall asleep and stay asleep without being disturbed all the time. If you can hear the traffic outside, have thin walls and hear your neighbors or so on, then these things will prevent you from sleep and may wake you up.
And you can use simple earplugs for that, or not so simple earplugs, or even combining both, which seems weird, but it works like a charm.
And I said that noises are a bit ambivalent because, yeah, external noises from outside are annoying and they disturb you.
But what you can use against this is something that is often used for babies.
White noise is a constant monotone noise that somehow reminds me of the ocean or maybe rain and has the power to absorb or overlay other sounds around you. And you do indeed get used to the sound. Just listen to it for 5 minutes or so and you will almost forget that it's there.
So you turn on the white noises and it blocks all the noises while you sleep.
And additionally, the last thing I want to mention regarding your room is its temperature.
Although especially in wintertime, it's really cozy to have a warm room, when you plan to go to sleep, it is generally advised to turn down that heating.
So as we discussed earlier, in stage 1 and 2 of NREM sleep, your core body temperature actually drops. So a cool room will make it easier for you to fall asleep and to stay asleep.
And if you want to be precise, 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18.3 degrees Celsius is what is recommended by sleep experts.
And there you go. Sleep doesn't have to be that complicated. You just have to understand the basics, the pitfalls there are, and the many decisions you can make to almost subconsciously make better decisions. And if you want to dig deeper into this topic, I highly recommend the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, Lifetime by Russell Foster, and the Huberman podcast episodes about sleep. Besides that, thank you so much for watching and good night.